Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. There wasn't a mother, father, or sibling to talk to him and tell him that he wasn't alone. The only thing he could hear was his own heartbeat, hurting like a stab, hurting more than anything else before. Kurama watched with sadness. He tried to talk with him, but Naruto did not once respond to him, almost like he couldn't hear him. He hoped for the best, and inside he cursed the damn Uchiha child for calling Naruto a monster. The kid didn't know what a monster is. A monster, or the likes of Jubi. Kurama felt a shiver of fear on his body, just the thought of that monster. Naruto kept his eyes on the floor. He kept asking himself the same question in his mind. What is life? Why do we exist? Is there any point in all this? Naruto didn't know the answer to any of these questions. To-chan, Ka-chan, why am I here? What can't I just be with you? I don't want to feel so alone, Naruto murmured impassively, no tears rolling down his cheek. Naruto, you're not alone, Kurama spoke, trying to ease his pain. Naruto was grateful for his friend, but he wanted someone. He wanted to see that look again, the look only his father could give him. Naruto closed his eyes and felt everything change around him. Opening his eyes again, his eyes saw the trees that had grown in his mindscape. He had hoped that Kurama would like it more with trees rather than just a sewer. Kurama, Naruto said, thinking his friend had brought him. But from behind a tree in front of him came out a man Naruto knew he had never seen before, but he recognized him, but he was sure he had never seen him before. The man had long dark hair, a long white kimono around his body, 2 fangs of hair in front of his ear, a blue paint just below his eyes, but his Mangekyo Sharingan was as clear as day. Indra, Naruto whispered. He didn't know how he knew he was Indra. The man stood in front of Naruto with a friendly smile on his face, and a war fan tightened behind his back. You're right, young Uchiha. My name is Indra Otsutsuki, Indra introduced himself. Naruto felt no malice coming from him and wondered how he was here. Why are you here? And how are you here? Naruto asked calmly, his body still a bit tense from the new person, something that Indra noticed. When you became my reincarnation, a bit of my chakra was sealed inside you, as did Ashura's chakra. This allows me and my brother to talk with you whenever you might need our advice, Indra explained. Naruto noticed there was no ill feeling coming from him whenever he mentioned Ashura. Naruto had assumed that Indra hated him for taking his place as heir. Now, I felt the feelings coming from you. The Uchiha brat insulted you. You asked yourself what the point of life was, Indra said, kneeling in front of Naruto and pulling out his left hand, showing his moon symbol to Naruto. Life has no point until you give it one. My advice to you, Naruto, is to find your point in life, what you truly want. Is it revenge, is it nothing, or is peace, Indra said. Naruto didn't want any revenge. Despite the village hating him, he didn't want harm caused to any of them. I want peace, Naruto replied. At this, Indra nodded his head in acceptance. We will talk again, young Uchiha, Indra said, and his figure disappeared. Suddenly Naruto was back in the apartment again, slowly standing up. He wondered if peace would bring him happiness. What even is happiness? Naruto took a deep breath and left the apartment. Soon Naruto reached the training yard and noticed both Itachi and Shisui talking to each other, and a small smile appeared on the blonde's face. He jumped and landed near them. Shisui noticed him and immediately smiled. Ooh, Naruto, you're back, Shisui said, clearly surprised. From what Itachi told him, he had suspected that his student would spend the whole day sulking in his apartment. Itachi turned his head with an uncertain look on his face. Naruto-kun, is good to see you again, he said, walking closer. Can we train Itachi-san? I want to continue what we left yesterday, Naruto said almost in a hurry. The last thing he wanted was to remember what happened yesterday. Both Shisui and Itachi gave each other a glance in understanding and decided to talk with him later. Shisui groaned and dragged a hand down his face. He stared at the two others from between his fingers. Then he remembered his original goal. Hey, you two, he yelled, popping back to his cheery attitude. Yes, Shisui-san. Itachi, enough already. Naruto just stopped with the san, not you two. Shisui moaned. Then he bounced up into a fighting stance. We should have a three-way spar. Naruto's eyes narrowed, honing in on Itachi and Shisui, sending shivers down their backs. It was like his eyes had suddenly turned into chips of ice. They could tell that Naruto was ready for anything. Any rules, Shisui? Naruto asked innocently. Yeah. No maiming and first to surrender loses, I guess. The three boys took up fighting stances, 2 textbook Uchiha Interceptor stances, and 1 academy stance. All three eyed a leaf that was gently floating downward. As soon as the leaf touched the ground, they all disappeared in a burst of speed. Naruto sat on the branch of a large tree, eyes darting in every direction for a possible attack. A brace of shuriken came flying towards Naruto, sending him jumping away to the right into Shisui, who twisted and kicked out at him. Naruto blocked the kick and was sent flying to the ground. He hit the ground with a roll as Shisui chased after him. Naruto threw 3 kunai directly at Shisui as he lunged towards Naruto. Shisui pulled out his own kunai and deflected the 3 kunai into Itachi, who had been silently sneaking up to Shisui. Itachi dodged the kunai, throwing his shuriken towards Naruto and leaping up to engage Shisui in a furious taijutsu bout. Naruto was a bit peeved, having been ridden off so quickly. He flashed through hand signs, futon, great breakthrough. Naruto sent a great burst of wind towards the fighting duo. The two boys turned toward the wind bullet simultaneously and leapt apart, narrowly dodging the bullet which drilled into the ground, sending great chunks of dirt everywhere. Itachi retaliated, his hand seal speed so fast that Naruto could barely make them out. Kaden, great fireball. A giant fireball flew at Naruto, who Kawarimi-ed out of the way, leaving a scorched log behind him. Hey, don't leave me out of this, yelled Shisui, who flipped through signs until a Kaden, Phoenix Flower Jutsu flew at both Itachi and Naruto. Naruto used another great breakthrough to block the fire, but hidden inside the flames were shuriken that he had to Kawarimi for. Itachi had simply avoided the fire and shuriken combo and rushed at Naruto as he dodged Shisui's attacks. Naruto threw 4 kunai at Itachi, using his newly learned technique to bounce a kunai into Itachi's blind spot. Itachi ducked his head, letting the kunai sail by harmlessly and threw a flurry of blows at Naruto. Dodging around the impacts, Naruto thought, this kid's good too. As expected of someone who trains with Shisui. He flipped backwards for space, throwing out more shuriken to discourage Itachi from approaching. Shisui used this opportunity to throw wire-wrapped shuriken at Itachi. Itachi leapt to the left, eyes widening as Shisui pulled the wires, curving the shuriken trajectory towards Itachi. Smirking, Itachi ran through the hand seals for Kawarimi at lightning-fast speed, swapping places with a wide-eyed Naruto. Oi, I'll get you for this, you know. Naruto screamed as he wildly ducked the shuriken and wires by bending over backwards. He flipped up and created 2 shadow clones, one ran off to fight Shisui, and the other ran towards Itachi. Shisui baited his clone into a wire trap and swiftly dispelled it, only encountering a new clone that surprised him by kicking him towards a tree. Shisui rebounded off the tree and shunsen straight at the clone, throwing a brace of shuriken at the clone as he went. Shuriken and Shisui crashing into the clone simultaneously caused the clone to pop in a cloud of smoke, blocking Shisui's vision for a precious second. Itachi meanwhile engaged his Naruto clone in a bout of taijutsu, assessing his skills with Sharingan rapidly spinning in his eyes. Blocking a high kick from Naruto, he swept his left foot out to catch Naruto's pivoting foot, but Naruto leapt into the air to aim another kick at Itachi. This caused Itachi to block with his arm, taking the heavy impact with a grunt. Naruto watched as Itachi dispatched his clone from where he was sitting on top of a tied-up Shisui. He hopped off the struggling Chunin and dashed towards Itachi. Itachi then performed a brutal takedown on Naruto, flipping over him, grabbing his shoulder, and throwing Naruto to the ground. The results of the spar revealed a few exciting things. First of all, Shisui and Naruto were faster than Itachi, but Itachi had better taijutsu than them. Between Shisui and Naruto, Naruto was the faster one, but Shisui was much more adept at Shunshin. They were all equally matched in ninjutsu, but none of the fighters had revealed their full repertoires. Itachi stared at Naruto in contemplation for a while after the spar. Opening and closing his mouth a few times, he finally managed to ask the question that had been on his mind. Naruto-san, I don't mean to be rude, but why haven't you become a genin yet? You are obviously skilled enough to pass the exams, despite being only 5 years old. Naruto tilted his head and considered the question. Why hadn't he decided to graduate just yet? He stood in silence for a worryingly long time before he answered Itachi. Itachi-san, perhaps it is because I have the luxury of not needing to graduate early. I want to enjoy my childhood despite having filled it with continuous training. Itachi nodded. He understood this very well, and he had been forced to graduate early from the pressures of his father and the demands of the clan elders. If clan duties had not demanded it of him, he might not have chosen to graduate either. Well, it's late enough, I guess. That was a good spar. You really caught me off guard with that clone there, Sunshine. Shisui said. I'll walk you home, Naruto. Itachi, you go on ahead of me, I'll catch up. Of course, it was very nice sparring with you today, Naruto-san. I hope we continue to have good relations in the future, said Itachi, dusting himself off. Yeah, for sure. And so the three boys set off on their ways. Shisui spent the majority of his walk with Naruto in content silence. He would often ward off some of the more malicious glares that the villagers sent towards Naruto with his Sharingan-enhanced stare. Thank you, Shisui, for being such a good friend, Naruto said earnestly. He was honestly thankful that Shisui had taken the time out of his day to search for him and effectively pull him out of his depression, and now he was worried for Naruto's well-being in the village. Ah, sunlight doesn't say that I'll get embarrassed, said Shisui, rubbing the back of his head awkwardly. I really mean it, you know. I'm really grateful to have met you. I just want you to know that. Naruto smiled sunnily at Shisui, who squinted his eyes at the brightness radiating off of Naruto. Shisui pulled Naruto into a gentle hug. Thanks, I guess. I'm glad that I know you as well, Sunlight. Naruto simply hugged Shisui back and nodded into his chest. Good night, Shisui. See you tomorrow. Yeah, night, Sunlight. Naruto just palmed his face at the name and sighed as Shisui gave a cheeky smile and wave and then disappeared in his signature Shunshin. After 4 months, Naruto had decided to spend his day in the apartment today, and it had been 6 years since Kyuubi was defeated, therefore, the whole village was celebrating. Naruto knew today was his birthday, but he didn't really expect gifts from anyone. He had decided to stay home because of the festival. People weren't really violent to him, but Naruto could tell their hatred towards him would double on his birthday, therefore, he always stayed inside to avoid any problems. As he was preparing to sleep again to pass the time, the door ringed. He felt no malice but wondered who could be there. Getting up, he walked over to the door, opening it. His eyes widened to see the mother of Itachi in the front door. Makoto-sama, what are you doing here? Naruto asked, just now noticing the bag she was holding. A frown showed on her face because of how he called her. Can I come inside? She asked warmly and smiled at the young blonde. Naruto smiled back and left her to walk inside. He thanked the gods that he wasn't the kind to have a messed up house. Everything was clean, and nothing was in the middle of the carpet. His bed was clean, and sheets were in place instead of being everywhere. Makoto saw the state of the apartment. At least his house was decent. Turning around, he saw Naruto still standing as if waiting for her to sit. Sitting down, she patted the place near her for Naruto to sit. The young blonde couldn't help but wonder why she wanted the likes of him to sit anywhere near her. Deciding not to object, he sat near, and the Lady Makoto opened the bag and pulled out a small box decorated with sprinkles and other beautiful things. Open it, Naruto-kun, she said softly. Naruto liked her tone and slowly opened the box to see a cake. On top of the cake were the words, "Happy birthday Naruto," with 6 candles near. The cake was made of chocolate and strawberries. Naruto felt tears in his eyes again, but this time there was no sadness. Do you like it? Makoto asked. Hoping he liked it, she saw his eyes filling with tears, and for a moment, she thought he didn't want her gift, but then he lunged at her, hugging her. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Naruto said over and over again and just couldn't stop. He felt her hands caressing his hair. She hugged him back and felt bad for him, and she still hated the old Hokage for not letting her adopt Naruto. He deserved a family like everyone else. After pulling away, Naruto with tears around his face. Thank you for the gift Makoto-san, Naruto said, still smiling brightly. She giggled and whipped his tears with her hand. You can call me Makoto-chan whenever you want, she said, smiling warmly at him. Naruto happily nodded his head. Makoto then pulled out a few shirts and a jacket from her bag, and Naruto noticed that each one of them looked his size. I hope you like them. I didn't know your favorite color, so I chose many, she said. Naruto smiled again, and he wondered if this is what it's like to have a mother. Did they give you gifts like this for your birthday? Thank you. They're very beautiful, Makoto-chan, Naruto replied immediately. Makoto smiled, happy that Naruto liked them. Makoto stayed with Naruto for an hour. Naruto learned that Itachi and Shisui were away on a mission, much to Naruto's surprise since this day was usually free and not a day for missions, decided to not think much about it. Naruto-kun, I know we didn't start the best way, but if you ever want, you can come and spend the night with my family, Makoto suggested, hoping that could work, and he wouldn't need to sleep alone in an empty apartment. Naruto swallowed his tears and nodded his head, his face shining like a star from happiness. See you later, Naruto-kun, Makoto said, giving a kiss to his forehead. Naruto touched the place on his forehead and followed her outside. Makoto walked away, giving him another hug. Naruto kept waving at her until she was out of his sight. Night. Naruto had just finished cooking when he felt people gathering in large numbers around his home. Dismissing it as part of the new Kyuubi festival, he started to eat. Until someone started to bang violently on his door. Naruto jumped to his feet and ran to his window. His senses were going haywire, detecting a large group of people standing in front of his door. Whoever was pounding so hard on his door had absolutely no positive intent towards Naruto at all. In fact, it was all negative, so negative that Naruto was reminded of a stormy night with a young crying girl and a pillow. He ran to the window and looked out, and then he quickly hopped out and ran off, shouts following him as he went. There he is. He went out the window. Catch him. Make him pay. Demon brat. Get back here. Naruto shot a quick glance behind him. What he saw made him pick up the pace and run faster. A mob. A mob had shown up at his apartment to hunt the fox brat. Naruto was honestly shocked at the amount of hate and people that had gathered. He had done his best to live unobtrusively in the village of Konoha, and people rarely saw him on the streets since he shopped under a henge. He never played with children as he was too busy training, and he never wandered the streets looking for food since he kept himself in good condition by budgeting. He didn't understand the sheer amount of hate that was pouring off of the mob pursuing him. Naruto ducked and weaved around various stalls, barely taking in his surroundings' bright colors and cheer as he ran for his life. He ran towards an alleyway hoping to throw the pursuers off his trail. It was not to be, unfortunately. There appeared to be some chunin in the drunken crowd who could accurately track him through the throngs of people that Naruto had run through. Naruto giggled hysterically under his breath as he ran, tears building at the corners of his eyes. He thought of all the ways this encounter could possibly end. None of the endings were particularly good. He hoped to lose the crowd, but it was difficult when bystanders would point in his direction as he lost the mob. Naruto turned his head towards the mob who were closing on him. His eyes turned to Sharingan, the symbols on his palms started shining. You're done. We didn't even need to get paid. We should have done this before. Naruto's face around his eyes turned dark as he did hand signs that he himself didn't recognize. Finishing it. Fire style. Great fire annihilation. At that moment, Naruto breathed out the largest fire he had ever seen. The fire was enough and engulfed the whole mob as they all started running away. Their screams filled the night as their corpses were the only thing left. Naruto saw everything covered in a thin dark thing that covered the ground, and their bodies were as black as coal. Nothing to recognize them was left in their scorched bodies. Everything in their bodies was burned, their skin, their eyes, and everything. Snow started falling from the clouds. Much to Naruto's surprise, he pulled out his hand and saw that it wasn't snowing, it was ash. Seeing what he had done, Naruto fell to his knees and let out the loudest scream. Later, Naruto popped up in front of the secretary, handling the desk in front of the cage office. She started and gave him a nasty look. Please, miss, I need to see the Hokage right now. He implored. The secretary sniffed and went back to her work. The Hokage is busy with essential matters, and he doesn't have time for children. But Naruto persisted. He was determined to talk to Sarutobi about the treatment he received at the hands of the villagers. Please miss, it important, and he needs to know. Look, he doesn't have time for children, so you can wait over there and see if you're lucky. She snappily replied. Naruto huffed in impatience. He stubbornly sat himself down on one of the seats in the lobby. He would wait as long as he needed. This couldn't be let go anymore. He didn't have to wait long since the day was ending, and the Sandame soon left the office to go home. Mildly startled by the blonde boy sitting in his lobby, the Sandame asked. Now, what's wrong, young Naruto? You've never sought me out like this before. Old man, a mob formed and chased me around Konoha. What? The Sandame's face instantly became grave. He opened the door to the office and waved Naruto in. Naruto took a seat in front of the Sandame's desk as the older man took his spot at the desk. Old man, this can't continue. The people hate me, and I don't know why. The older man rubbed his temples tiredly. I'm sorry, Naruto, they hate what they don't understand and fear. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Was the older man going to tell him about his role as Jinchuriki finally? What do you mean by fear? The Sandame shook his head. I'm sorry, Naruto, I can't tell you just yet, there's too much you don't understand yet. Naruto was filled with a crushing disappointment in the Sandaime. That's not very encouraging, you know. And can't you just explain what it is that I don't know? I can keep a secret. He coolly responded. I'm sorry, but you're too young. Naruto stood from his chair, calmly walking up to Sandaime to stare him in the face. I'm too young to know why the village hates me. I'm too young to know why they stare at me like that as I walk the streets. I'm too young to know why the prices are doubled when I try to buy anything. I'm too young to know why I don't have parents. I'm too young to know why mothers pull their children away as I walk by. I'm too young to understand why a mob formed with the intention of lynching me. The Sandaime stared at Naruto with wide eyes. He honestly did not know of the extent of the village's animosity towards the child. What about my parents? Did they not leave anything to me? You said they were shinobi, that means they must have left something for me to inherit. Naruto asked with a stern look that even Sandaime was surprised. Hiruzen knew Minato and Kushina had left Naruto many things, but if he told him now, Naruto would understand who they were, and that would put him in danger from forces outside Konoha. With a wounded heart, he was not even daring to look at his eyes. I'm sorry, but you're too young, he said with a heavy heart. In the following months Naruto had taken upon himself to train as much as possible. He used shadow clones every day to fight with him, train taijutsu, learn different ninjutsu, and master his chakra control. Naruto had taken his training much more seriously, something that was noticed immediately by Shisui and Itachi. Naruto still felt anger. The Hokage had to deny him his heritage, to let him live alone, without anyone, not to allow him to see and know what his parents had left for him. A group of shadow clones rushed towards him, and Naruto jumped high in the air doing hand signs. Fire style. Fireball jutsu, a massive ball of fire evaporated every clone in the ground, and the fire kept burning for a few more minutes. Instead of yellow flames, Naruto's flames were crimson red like blood. He didn't know why. Not even Kurama knew why. Itachi had shown him how to do shadow clones since it was hard for Naruto to do the other versions. And not to mention that Itachi stated that being a Jinchuriki could be beneficial to use the secret of shadow clones to its fullest. Naruto leapt away from a thrown kunai. Jumping from tree to tree as he dodged various projectiles sent his direction by an incensed Itachi. Naruto had finally paid Itachi back for his cheeky kawarimi during their first free-for-all battle by dyeing Itachi's bright pink hair with a cleverly thrown water balloon. Come on, Itachi, calm down. It's not waterproof. Naruto cackled as he leapt from branch to branch. Just dunk your head in the creek and cool off. Ahaha. It had been nearly 1 year since the three boys had met each other, and they were as thick as thieves. They had agreed to form a partnership in the near future so that they could take the same missions together. During the 1 year that had passed, Shisui and Itachi joined the Anbu to further support their clan's standing. Though this meant less time for Naruto with the duo, they still made an effort to train regularly with the whiskered blonde. Naruto had met Sasuke while Itachi taught him. Sasuke seemed to dislike Naruto on principle. He viewed Naruto as someone trying to steal his brother's time even though Itachi obviously preferred to cater to his younger brother's whims most of the time. Makoto appeared to be highly pleased that Itachi spent time with Naruto since he had no one, while his father just kept quiet and didn't care much, or at least it didn't show that he did. Unfortunately, tensions between the Uchiha and the rest of Konoha had worsened. People now openly expressed discontent with the Uchiha military police. There were whispers of a possible rebellion in the works. Even Naruto had somehow become involved in the whole mess. Certain people accused the Uchiha of consorting with the Kyuubi due to Naruto's interactions with Shisui and Itachi. They eventually had to move their training to Training Grounds 44 just for privacy. A few times, unsavory individuals who had been encouraged by the mob incident had tried following Naruto to give him a beating. Naruto always detected them from far away and remembered his lessons from the chase. He would henge away or send a shadow clone in a random direction. He also took the time to explore Konoha during his prank spree for the best hiding places and noted all the dead ends he encountered. Finally giving up on catching Naruto, Itachi panted as he slumped on the ground, pink hair dangling in front of his face limply. Naruto saw that Itachi had given up and cheekily bounced over to pat Itachi on the head. Itachi glared weakly at Naruto from between strands of neon hair. Hey, Naru, ha 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 ha. Shisui had just arrived at the clearing that Itachi stopped in and caught sight of his bright hair. Shisui high-fived Naruto. You really got him good this time. Nice one. Yeah, you should have seen his face when I hit him. Itachi humped and turned away from the two to wash his hair in the nearby creek. So, he asked as he rinsed his hair out, what did you call us out here for, Shisui? Oh, nothing. In particular, I thought we needed a day off from missions, and we could just hang out with Naruto. Shisui chirped, plopping down on the ground and crossing his legs. Naruto copied Shisui, getting comfortable on the ground in front of Shisui. So what should we do today then? Shisui shrugged blithely, I don't know. Anbu has been rough lately, and Itachi could use a break. Itachi walked over to the two, wringing his hair out and shaking his head, sending drops of water flying at Naruto and Shisui, earning indignant shouts of reproach. He then sat down, completing their little triangle. I had been meaning to ask you too. What do you think the meaning of a shinobi is? Naruto and Shisui both blinked at Itachi, not expecting the philosophical question at this time of day. Typically Itachi waited until later in the evening to start asking thought-provoking questions. Well, Naruto started, I think a shinobi is someone who endures the pains of the world for the sake of others. A shinobi is also someone who does the right thing when others might be less inclined to do. Indeed, said Shisui, a shinobi is someone who acts in darkness to protect his village. Itachi nodded his head, deep in thought. Naruto examined Shisui and Itachi closely. Recently, it felt as if they were distancing themselves from him. He chalked it up to the pressures of Anbu, but Itachi was acting strange. Itachi, what's on your mind? Nothing you need to worry about, Naruto. Shisui looked at Itachi knowingly. He, too, was worried about his friend. Itachi was the clan heir and thus knew more details about the coup than Shisui, who was an Uchiha orphan, did. Itachi was lost in thought. Unaware of his companion's thoughts, Naruto simply scrutinized them closely. He could feel that they both were troubled and conflicted, Itachi more so than Shisui. He didn't know what could upset them, so, perhaps it was an Anbu mission gone wrong. Itachi, do you know any clone jutsu I could work with? Naruto asked them, hoping to break from their silence. Itachi turned to Naruto and looked at him as if he didn't understand him. What did you say? I said if you can help me with any clone jutsu. I tried normal ones, but they just don't work with me, Naruto stated, hoping he could do something. Naruto, why are you training so much? It has been 3 months since you have started training harsher, Shisui asked, concerned that Naruto was training more than he should. At this question, Naruto stood up from where they were sitting and took a few steps away, his head facing his direction. For a moment, both Itachi and Shisui thought that he would walk away, but instead, he turned his head towards them. Naruto then went on and explained everything that happened on the night of his birthday. He left out that he used a much stronger fire jutsu instead of fireball, but everything else was how it happened. Both Shisui and Itachi were shocked to hear that. Itachi felt disappointed with his cage. He had assumed someone like him would try to help Naruto, but instead, he was denying him something that he didn't have the right to refuse. Shisui immediately stood up and put his hand on his shoulder and making him look up at him. Do you want to talk about it? Shisui asked with a move of his eyes, indicating if he wanted to talk about the people he'd with the fire jutsu. Naruto shook his head. No, I didn't have any other choice. Naruto stopped talking and just kept staring at the ground below his feet. After that day, Naruto started learning using his shadow clones. Itachi showed him how to do shadow clones and told him about the secret of shadow clones. It had taken less than an hour for Naruto to learn the jutsu. Both Shisui and Itachi were stunned by what he accomplished, something that a normal Jonin would take days or even months of training. Right now, Naruto was resting after training for 6 hours straight. His clones were in his apartment reading useful things he needed to know. Naruto knew the academy would start after 3 months. He didn't care much about the academy of the village. He didn't care much about the village overall. The only attachment he could think of he had with the village was his attachment with Shisui, Itachi and his family, except Sasuke. Naruto had visited the house of Itachi once more since his birthday. Naruto walked inside the house behind Itachi, and he saw Sasuke standing in front of a lake doing hand signs. Ka-chan, I am home, Itachi announced. Makoto walked from the kitchen. Itachi-kun is good. Oh, Naruto-kun is good to have you here. Makoto spoke warmly and kissed Naruto's cheek, much to his annoyance. But he secretly smiled, liking the feeling of mother love. Itachi smiled and turned his attention towards his mother. Where's Tu-san? He asked with a hint of hesitation in his tone, something that Naruto noticed immediately. He's working, she simply said with a slightly forced smile. Naruto could feel the air around him, and that made him uncomfortable. Makoto-san, I see you're preparing dinner. Can I help? Naruto asked, hoping to lighten up the mood. Of course, Naruto-chan, she agreed, and Naruto followed her to the kitchen. Naruto soon started preparing the dinner with her, mixing different things, and hoping that he was doing an excellent job at it. Itachi had walked upstairs for something, and Naruto felt a glare behind him. He glanced behind him to see Sasuke standing in the middle of the living room, his eyes narrowed at him. Naruto just ignored the emo and kept making the dinner. Soon who Naruto assumed was Itachi's Tu-san came. The man stood taller than Itachi, with dark hair and the eyes of a shinobi, something that Naruto had seen only in a few people. I am home, his voice echoed throughout the house. Makoto stopped whatever she was doing and went to him in the living room. Naruto didn't hear what they said since she had closed the kitchen door but didn't feel any malice, so that was a good sign. Soon the dinner was prepared, and Naruto walked inside the living room to see a low-level table in the middle of the room. Makoto was bringing plates to the table, helped by Itachi while they told Naruto to relax since he had already done enough. The young blonde saw Sasuke whispering something to his father, but Naruto didn't try to lean closer and hear whatever they were talking about. Sitting at the table caused Sasuke to glare at him, while the man looked surprised to see Naruto. You must be Naruto that Itachi keeps talking about. My name is Fugaku Uchiha. Fugaku introduced himself and pulled out his hand towards Naruto. The young blonde smiled and shook his hand. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Soon Itachi and Makoto sat at the table. Not much was talked about. Fugaku asked Naruto a few questions about his training, how he liked this part of the village. Naruto answered that he wanted it more than his house and that his movement was going well. Ni-san, can you train me tomorrow? Sasuke asked, looking at Itachi. Of course, tomorrow is free, and Naruto can come as well, Itachi replied. The mention of the blonde caused Sasuke to pout, but he decided not to say anything. This dinner is very delicious, Makoto-chan, Fugaku praised his wife, smiling. This caused Makoto to giggle and point the finger at Naruto, making him blush. Naruto prepared it, she replied, much to Fugaku's shock. Well, Naruto, it seems you have a knack for preparing food, he said with a kind tone. After dinner, Sasuke had walked to the lake again. After helping Makoto-san with the plates, Naruto walked up to Sasuke, hoping they could be friends perhaps. He saw him making hand signs and recognized them as hand signs for fireball jutsu. The blonde walked close to him and stood just 3 feet away. After another failed attempt to do the fireball jutsu, Sasuke started getting irritated. You're not focusing enough on your breath, he heard behind him and turned to see the blonde. This caused him to clench his teeth in anger. What could you know? Sasuke asked with a mocking tone. Naruto didn't care but just took 3 steps forward and started doing the hand signs. He breathed a huge amount of air as he finished the last hand sign, and with that, he breathed out an enormous fireball that Sasuke had seen before. See, you need to breathe a huge amount of air before you finish the hand signs, just doing them won't. Nobody asked you parentless, Sasuke screamed at him and ran inside his house. Naruto felt the air stuck in his throat again, his throat felt dry, and his chest started hurting. His breath quickened as his chest tightened. No, Naruto breathed out as he felt no place to run. He fell on his knees trying to breathe, but he just couldn't, his vision dizzy as the darkness surrounded him. The last thing he felt was a pair of hands around his legs and back carrying him and a voice. Naruto-kun. Naruto had woken up in the hospital. The doctors were glaring at him as much as possible, some of them probably wishing he had never woken up. Makoto-chan had been on his bed when he woke up and had hugged him almost to death and yelled at him never to do something like that again. It seems that he had a panic attack. The same day he woke up, he left the hospital. Makoto had asked him if he remembered anything. Still, Naruto just said he didn't remember what happened, but surprisingly Itachi didn't ask what had happened. Makoto-chan, of course, told him to visit again, but Naruto just said that he would but didn't. Right now, he was still resting from training when he felt Itachi walking close, and he turned his head just in time to see him jump from a branch. Naruto-kun, what is it? Itachi asked since Naruto had asked him if he could meet him. It was 7 p.m., and the sun had already set behind the horizon. I need to tell you something, Itachi. Promise to not tell anyone, except maybe Shisui, Naruto said with a serious tone. Itachi immediately nodded his head without hesitation. I promise. Naruto said nothing but walked close to him and closed his eyes much to his confusion but opened them, revealing his fully matured Sharingan. This caused Itachi to stiffen, and his eyes widened, but his eyes immediately turned to Sharingan. How do you have the Sharingan? Itachi asked with a much more serious tone, and he hoped this wasn't someone acting like Naruto despite him not detecting anything amiss. Naruto went on and told him about his Sharingan, how his father was Minato Namikaze and that he had been half Uchiha. Naruto, of course, left out the part that he was the reincarnation of Ashura and Indra, but just told him that he had met his father in his mindscape thanks to the seal. He also told him that he and Kyuubi were friends and that his real name was Kurama. Itachi wasn't sure about trusting Kyuubi, but he believed Naruto, but he immediately noticed that he was hiding something but decided that Naruto would tell him when he felt comfortable. You truly are one of a kind, Itachi stated, smiling and patting his back. This made Naruto smile. Thank you, Itachi. You can call me Ni-san, Naruto. Secret place. Danzo slammed his hand on the table, enraged. The root agent standing in front of him stoically did not flinch. You mean to tell me that a crowd of adults and fully trained Chunin lost a child in our village? Yes, sir. After the boy turned a corner on 56th Street, the crowd was unable to locate the boy again. Danzo leaned back in his chair and sighed, such incompetent ninja in Konoha's forces nowadays. This is precisely why his route was necessary for the well-being of the village. He was furious. His plot to attack the Jinchuriki with a mob and then save him, thus making the Jinchuriki indebted to him, had failed spectacularly. Now years of planning had potentially gone down the drain. Hiruzen was suspicious of him now. Root was on the verge of being disbanded. No matter. The Jinchuriki was always a long-term goal. There are other ways to secure his loyalty. Continue to monitor the boy as usual. The Foundation agent nodded and disappeared. Even the reports he received regarding the Jinchuriki were unsatisfactory. At times the boy would disappear from his agent's view, and they would not be able to locate him again for hours. It bothered him a lot that even the best of his spies couldn't read the boy. Somehow a 6-year-old boy would know he was being followed and would never train openly or would lose the spies before disappearing to do who knows what. Danzo resolved himself. For the good of Konoha, the Jinchuriki must be under his thumb. Hiruzen was simply too soft to make use of the Jinchuriki's full potential. Naruto. It had been a week since he told Itachi about his Sharingan. He then had told Shisui, but only when Naruto was present as well. To say Shisui was surprised would be like saying that Minato had been the slowest shinobi. Shisui immediately had asked for a spar with him, both of them using Sharingan. According to him, Itachi's Sharingan had gotten rusty and not a challenge to him. Naruto had laughed while Itachi had playfully rolled his eyes. Having them as friends felt the best thing. Naruto hoped this would never change. They were his only friends, and Itachi was his big brother. Shisui had started calling him his little Uchiha brother as well, and to him, Naruto was family as much as a little brother. Right now, Naruto was walking through the village and couldn't help but notice the ways the citizens were acting, for the first time since forever, and their attention seemed to be somewhere else and not at the little blonde. Listening closely to what they were saying, he heard that Kumo shinobi were here to discuss peace. Naruto fought the urge to roll his eyes. Peace was a delicate thing, even easier to break than glass. One wrong move, and it will shatter and will be very hard ever to put the pieces back together. Night. The Hyuga compound stretched before the intruder in the darkness. He eyed its stern white walls, standing forbiddingly tall, with growing wariness. Inside them, rows of houses lined up in neat patterns. He pressed on, slithering stealthily near the ground, his hands locked so tightly into a handseal they trembled. A precarious camouflage genjutsu was his only lifeline and the reason he'd been chosen for this mission. It was a clever thing, a technique of suggestion. Slowly, he weaved his chakra into subtle signals that crept gently into the guards' minds. And though they scoured the compound, all-seeing, they overlooked him as though part of the scenery, a meaningless object blending into the background so neatly, they'd glance around and over and behind him, their brains not even registering the threat. Without hiding him, it made reality around him more pronounced, more eye-catching, infinitely more vivid, and interesting to look at. It diverted the attention of drowsy, bored sentinels who had not dealt with a serious threat in months, mainly because no one dared. The jutsu had one clear, fatal limitation: focus. If a single eye looked at him, truly, directly at him, he was dead. And worse, disgraced, a failure. Silently, he sent a prayer up to the thunder god. Then he scuttled between two little houses, past a deserted courtyard, towards the heart of the compound. His destination. Walls within walls, he thought, steeling himself for the climb. The outer level had been all branch member houses, dozens of them modest and neat, singularly nondescript. It had been easy enough to navigate. All roads led to the center, where the mansions of the main house stood stately behind their proud white walls. From there on, Security more than doubled. Within lay the living treasures of the Hyuga clan. The unsealed. The enslavers of their own kin, he thought, his lip curling in distaste. His task was to abduct an unsealed Hyuga child, securing the famed bloodline for the glory of his village. The main house consisted of less than 20 individuals, the head, his council, and their heirs. There only existed a single unsealed Hyuga younger than 5, and she was zealously guarded at all times. Hyuga Hinata. His mission objective. He jumped off the wall softly, crouching low on the ground. For a moment, he held still and searched. Chakra signatures of small children were such soft things. In the gardens, he thought with some surprise. Though it saved him the trouble of having to penetrate the mansion, he wondered warily if it wasn't some kind of trap. What could such a small child be doing out of bed in the middle of the night? Had his plan been found out? Narrowing his eyes, he sharpened his chakra sense, stepping without a sound between rows of flowering plants. The blonde had noticed the Kumo shinobi lurking around the Hyuga clan during the day. Naruto kept his eyes on the Kumo shinobi. He was only a kid, but even he knew Konoha and Kuno didn't have the best of friendships. The night came, and Naruto felt the shinobi within the Hyuga clan. Unknown to Naruto, the symbol of the moon on his left palm started shining in a dark color. Naruto followed behind and stood just outside the clan compound, his face shadowed by the shadow of the houses, but his purple eyes shined through the darkness. Naruto saw the kidnapper carrying a bag over his shoulder, and the Uchiha could feel the small child in the bag. His blood boiled at the man daring to kidnap a little girl and use her for their own needs and use her like a cow. Naruto released his ki, and his left hand raised slowly at the ninja who had frozen in place from his superior ki. Bansho Tenin. Naruto spoke with a dark tone. The shinobi suddenly started getting pushed towards him. As he got closer, Naruto raised his right hand. A dark rod came out of his palm, but no blood, and Naruto pierced his stomach, causing the shinobi to feel the full chakra of the kid. The shinobi screamed in pure agony as he gripped his head with his palms, almost trying to pull something out of his head. Naruto's face didn't even twitch from his agony, his face as cold as ice. His eyes went to the child inside the bag, his eyes turned to the shinobi moving in the grass like an injured animal, his hands trying to take out the rod. Because of that, Naruto put his hand on the rod and with a single move, he pulled out the rod, causing the blood around his wound spill out faster. His blood started spreading around the grass like rain. His purple eyes suddenly turned to blue again, and the moon on his left palm stopped shining. Naruto felt dizzy all of a sudden. His young body fell on his knees, his hands on the grass. Naruto tried to catch his breath. He wasn't sure what exactly happened when his senses felt the chakra coming closer. His eyes glanced at the bag moving, and he slowly stood up, his chest rising up and down repeatedly. He still tried to catch his breath. He walked over to the bag and opened it, seeing hair sticking out, her white eyes looking up at Naruto. The blonde was about to ask if she was okay when his senses went wild. He jumped high in the air, barely dodging a dangerous strike from a man. Landing on the ground, his eyes found the man who attacked. His Byakugan activated, his palms up and ready to strike again. "Stay away from my daughter, demon," the man screamed with anger through his clenched teeth. Before Naruto could say anything, "Brother, stop, look in the ground." Naruto turned his head to see another person walking over to them, followed by several guards who glared at Naruto at the moment notice. The blonde saw the new guy was very similar to the one who attacked him. Hiyashi looked down to see the man lying on the ground motionless. His eyes widened that someone tried to kidnap his daughter, and he perhaps almost did her savior. "To-san, he saved me." The voice of Hinata was heard like a whimper, her eyes looking up at her father. Naruto decided to leave and let them deal with their situation when at that moment, the glorious Hokage showed up at the compound. Son of a bitch, Naruto cursed his luck, the Hokage couldn't choose any other time to show up but now. Hiruzen saw Naruto standing there, avoiding his direction, but the Hokage's eyes found Hiashi Hyuga, who kneeled and slowly pulled away the mask covering the man lying on the grass. Almost everyone gasped to see it was the Kumo ambassador. Hiashi, how did this happen? Hiruzen demanded an explanation. Unknown to him, both Itachi and Kakashi, who were wearing Anbu masks, looked at Naruto with concern. Hiashi went on and explained that a scream was heard in the middle of the night. He first checked Hinata's room to see her missing. He then told them that he found the blonde opening the bag and that the shinobi was dead in the ground. Hiruzen exhaled at the thought that Kumo had betrayed them and had tried to kidnap a child of Konoha, but what stuck to him even more was Naruto's involvement in all of this. He knew Itachi trained Naruto, but he shouldn't be able to a Jonin. Itachi paid close attention to the Hokage's reaction towards Naruto. While Kakashi was surprised and saddened that Naruto was forced to someone at such a young age, but otherwise happy that Naruto could protect himself and a member of Konoha. Everyone's eyes turned to Naruto when Hiashi explained what had happened. Naruto, I would like you to come with me, Hokage stated with no place to decline. The blonde just followed behind. Hiashi, you as well, Sarutobi ordered. The Hyuga nodded his head. Hinata was escorted inside, soon rejoined with her mother. Hokage Tower. The Hokage sat at his seat as every clan head was here. In this meeting, he didn't invite the civil council since they weren't necessary. Almost every head clan was surprised by the sudden meeting of the council in the middle of the night. It was 3 a.m. But all of them were double surprised to see Naruto standing in the room, his hands behind his neck, not caring much. Itachi, Kakashi, Yamato and Yugao stood hidden in the shadow, their eyes looking at the blonde, three of them surprised to see a lack of reaction from Naruto aftering someone. Kakashi made a mental note to ask later Naruto about it. Maybe the blonde was even more shocked than they thought, and he was hiding it behind an emotionless mask. On the other hand, Itachi looked weary of the whole situation. He hoped they wouldn't try to punish Naruto. He was his little brother, and he would protect him. Danzo looked at the demon weapon with a suspicious eye. He wondered what was happening. He hated that right now he had no information on the situation. Perhaps Sarutobi had finally decided to hand him the weapon. Fukagu looked surprised to see the little blonde here, and he could say that they were lucky that Makoto didn't know about this yet. Sarutobi cleared his throat. I know it is very late, but a betrayal has happened, causing everyone to hold breath. The ambassador of Kumo this night went inside and tried to kidnap Hinata Hyuga. Luckily Naruto was able to stop him and save the Hyuga heiress. This caused anger to fill everyone except Danzo, who looked interested to know how could a 6-year-old child stop a Jonin. Everyone had different thoughts on this. Shikaku felt a headache slowly driving him mad. This is troublesome, he thought and cleared his throat. Lord Hokage, I think we should let know Kumo what their shinobi tried to do. We don't know yet if he acted out of selfish reasons or if someone ordered him, Shikaku stated, knowing full well the chances of the latter were much higher. Hiruzen nodded his head and called, Dog. Within a second, Kakashi stood kneeling in front of the Hokage, close to where Naruto was standing. Send this scroll to Jiraiya. I'm afraid he should cut his research short, Hokage stated and threw a scroll at Kakashi, who grabbed it and disappeared as soon as it appeared. Naruto's ears perked up at the mention of the Sannin and wondered if he would decide to visit him. And maybe perhaps try to make up for his complete absence in Naruto's life. Now that Kakashi had left, Sarutobi knew Kakashi's dogs would find him in no time and know the situation's seriousness, and he would come to back up the village. With that thought done, Now the only thing left was Naruto. Turning his eyes at the blonde, he cleared his throat, getting everyone's attention. Naruto, I would like to know how you were able to defeat the Jonin. Sarutobi asked warmly, and he knew right now that he wasn't on the best of terms with Naruto, but he hoped to make up for it somehow soon. During the day, I noticed the shinobi lurking around the Hyuga compound. When night came, I waited for a few blocks away to see if he would try anything. When he suddenly jumped over from the wall, right in front of me. At first, he told me to leave and forget I saw anything, but I stood my ground, and since I'm a child, he underestimated me. I used Shunsen to show up in front of him. He was caught off guard by my speed, and I stabbed him in the liver, Naruto explained. Hiruzen was impressed that he used the shinobi's ego against him, while Shikaku thought Naruto could be an impressive strategist if only he could spend some time with him. Fugaku smiled warmly at the kid for saving the girl, while the Uchiha clan and Hyuga clan didn't exactly see eye to eye. Even Fugaku would never wish that kind of fate to any of the Hyuga residents. Hiyashi made a mental note to thank Naruto later and to apologize for attacking him. While Danzo thought that the demon right now had even more value than before, he needed to speed up his plan a bit. Can I leave now? Naruto asked indifferently. Hiruzen thankfully nodded his head, and Itachi escorted him outside. Leaving the Hokage tower, Itachi immediately turned to Naruto and put his hand on his shoulder. You sure you alright? Itachi asked, concerned, and his eyes were checking for any wound. Naruto smiled happily to have a big brother like Itachi, and he nodded his head. I'm fine, Ni-san, but thanks for asking. Itachi accepted the answer and led him to his house. Naruto was lying on his bed, already asleep. Itachi checked around the house for anything, and his eyes turned at Naruto again, who was peacefully sleeping. What would you do in my situation, Naruto? Itachi whispered with evident sorrow in his tone. Tomorrow, Kumo. The following day, a shout was heard inside the Raikage tower. The table in the room was thrown across the room, getting destroyed when it hit the wall. While this was happening, a certain Jinchuriki stood silent, waiting to hear what was the problem now. Big bro, what has GG got you, so angry? B asked while rapping and moving his hands around and doing weird poses in front of his brother. The Raikage glared at his little brother for taking this as some kind of joke. I had been against the plan but couldn't help but agree that Kumo needed a bloodline. Our shinobi was trying to kidnap the girl, I stated with evident anger, but not towards the act but towards his own shinobi for getting caught. B stopped rapping, and a visible frown erupted on his face. He told his brother not to try it, but he just couldn't help himself, stating that Kumo barely had any bloodline. B hated how the hidden villages still acted towards each other. Why couldn't they just let go of these petty things and live? B hated that with this done, he wondered what the difference between Kumo and the likes of Orochimaru was. Just the thought of his country being no different made him want to vomit. So, what now? Are they declaring war against us? B asked, knowing there was a high chance of them declaring war for trying to kidnap a member of their village, not mentioning a child. War had been started in the past for far less. No, they had sent me a letter to explain why a shinobi tried to kidnap a member of their village. Therefore I will go there. Perhaps we still haven't lost yet, I replied, looking outside the window and thinking of a plan. B frowned dependent. He chewed his lower lip and held his tongue. He wanted to remind his brother not to poke a sleeping tiger. He thought perhaps reminding him that they had Kyuubi might work. Still, they knew Kyuubi was sealed in a child, and therefore the chances of him being able to use Kyuubi were slim. Should I tag along? B asked, knowing his brother would like to bring his strongest shinobi to show strength. I nodded his head immediately, still looking through the window. Darui is coming along as well, he replied, and thought bringing Yugito might or might not be a good idea. She was still only 8 years old but quite good for a young kunoichi. B thought to leave when his brother turned to look at him. Be prepared for anything. Itachi. Where's Naruto-kun? He could be scared alone, his mother shouted at him. To say Makoto Uchiha was angry would be like saying that Orochimaru is a good guy. Itachi had come home with his father and explained to his mother what had happened. When she heard that the Hokage sent Naruto into his home alone after a foreign shinobi, she got furious. What is that old man even thinking? Naruto-kun needs someone to tell him that what he did was not wrong and not feel alone, Makoto half shouted at both him and his father. Miko-chan, you know we can't have Naruto sleeping in this house, our reputation with the Hokage is already falling down the hill, and him getting suspicious that we are using something on Naruto when he isn't looking can worsen our situation, Fugaku explained, knowing full well how his wife was whenever Naruto was mentioned. Makoto bit her lower lip, tears developing in her eyes. She could feel the disappointing look of Kushina-chan. She should have raised her son. Screw the Hokage. Naruto needed someone not to be alone. Did the Hokage not understand how much trauma that could bring, or he simply didn't care? Ka-chan, tomorrow after my workday is over, I will bring Naruto here again if he wishes, Itachi suggested. Makoto looked at Itachi and nodded in agreement. Konoha. Naruto. He stood motionless, just staring at the ceiling. As he stood on his bed, he thought of the Anbu that visited him this morning. Naruto recognized his chakra. He knew that Anbu had watched over him many times. Naruto opened his eyes at the sound of the birds singing near his window. His head slowly raised and sat on a sitting position in the middle of the bed. His blue eyes watched the birds playing around with each other. He saw another flying to a branch in a tree. There was a small hole in the tree, and 3 tiny beaks coming out and demanding food. Naruto smiled at the mother giving her children food through the peak. His eyes then turned to his empty apartment, and his heart fell into the darkest abyss. Good morning, Naruto, Kurama suddenly said, smiling at the little blonde. Naruto's face brightened up like the sun, his smile from ear to ear. Good morning, Kurama, he said and jumped from the bed to the wooden floor. Naruto's eyes went to the moon symbol on his palm, and he couldn't help but think of last night. Kurama, did you feel anything different last night? Naruto asked, thinking that his friend might know anything. Feel what? I didn't feel anything unusual, not knowing where the blonde was going with this. Last night I saved the girl, but I don't remember much. It almost feels like a clouded memory. It feels almost like I wasn't the one who did that, Naruto replied, still looking at the moon symbol on his palm. Now that Naruto mentioned, Kurama did find it odd the lack of reaction from Naruto. At the same time, he knew his little friend hated people before intentionally and unintentionally. Still, his complete lack of response, almost acing people, had been something he had done for years now and didn't scare him anymore. I don't know Naruto, but perhaps you should ask Indra. After all, the Uchiha did say you can have his advice whenever you want, Kurama advised and hated that he couldn't help him in this situation. Naruto mentally nodded and started preparing breakfast, boiled eggs with bread and onions. Both Itachi-ni-san and Makoto-chan told him to eat vegetables and fruits. After preparing it, he started eating the boiled egg with bread. After he was done, he took a bite from onion and had to admit it wasn't as bad as he thought. Knock knock. Naruto stopped eating and walked over to the door. Opening it, he saw the Anbu with dog mask that he saw last night. The blonde wondered what he wanted so early, or maybe the Hokage had requested his presence. Can I come in? The Anbu asked respectfully. Naruto opened the door wider and stepped aside as the Anbu walked inside. Closing the door, he turned to the Anbu. What can I do for you, Anbu-san? Naruto asked, still thinking he was here because the Hokage sent him. I wanted to check if you were okay. You ED someone last night. Many people find it hard to deal with the first time, Kakashi replied, knowing his first time was when he was only 5 years old. Naruto was only 6. Not that age made that much of a difference. No matter how old you are, the first timing someone will always be hard. Naruto found his concern surprising. Is not the first time wide someone before. People of this village sometimes tend to get drunk and sometimes they leave you no choice, Naruto replied, knowing the Anbu root heat in the mob that had gathered to give him a birthday surprise. Kakashi's eyes widened at what he heard. He never thought that anyone actually attacked Naruto. He wondered if Hokage knew of it, and if he did, why did he not tell him? When did that happen? Anbu asked with a much more serious tone. Naruto explained what happened on his birthday, except he told him that only a few people had gathered at his house that night. Kakashi remembered that he had been on a mission during the celebration for the defeat of the Kyuubi, which Kakashi couldn't help but find odd. Usually, that day was free of work. I see. If you need to talk with anyone, you can talk to me, Kakashi stated. Naruto nodded his head, and the Anbu left. Single quote. Naruto stood up and left the apartment, and he needed to train and get stronger to protect his Uchiha family. Reaching the training yard, he did the shadow clone jutsu, and 1,000 clones suddenly appeared. Alright, 100 start reading, 700 start training on elemental manipulation, and the other 200 will beat me up. Soon the clones left to do their jobs. Naruto's eyes stayed blue as he prepared for training. After 5 hours, once a training ground stood, now filled with craters everywhere, Naruto was lying on the biggest crater, his body spread, sweat rolling down his face, his shirt was wet with sweat, and his back ached badly. In the following hours Naruto trained, using taijutsu and ninja weapons, like kunai, shuriken and swords, but not once did he use the Sharingan. He wanted to train without Sharingan. He used it only against Itachi or Shisui or if he had no other choice against someone else. As he kept breathing, a thought occurred to Naruto. He slowly put his hands on the ground and stood up, still breathing heavily. Kurama, Indra said I could talk with him and Ashura, but can I also talk with Hashirama and Madara? Naruto mentally asked, thinking of what Indra said to him. Kurama thought of it, and if he was sincere, he wasn't entirely sure. Indra mentioned that when Naruto became their reincarnation, a bit of their chakra was sealed inside Naruto, but he mentioned nothing of Hashirama and Madara's chakra. Is worth a try, but don't get your hopes up, Kurama stated. I have never my hopes up anymore, Naruto replied and sat with his legs crossed and closed his eyes. For a few minutes, nothing happened when he suddenly felt the air itself change, it felt calmer, and he felt sleepy. Opening his blue eyes, he was back in the forest of his mindscape. But surprisingly, the ground everywhere was covered by red leaves. What can I do for you, young Senju? Ashura asked kindly. Ashura, I wanted to ask what is your advice on what to do with how hidden villages are with each other. Hashirama told me that he and Madara united the clans and created Hidden Leaf Village, but there's no peace. This is just a temporary peace, a war hidden in the shadows waiting to explode. What should I do? Naruto asked, feeling anger. The shinobi had been ordered by the Raikage to kidnap a Hyuga if he could be a Hyuga child. Naruto knew this, but he wasn't sure how. The whole memory of him saving Hinata was almost clouded, but not the memories of the dead Jonin, and Naruto wasn't sure why. The blonde had thought to tell the Hokage, but right now, he wasn't sure if the old man was trustworthy anymore. Telling him about the memories of the dead Jonin would force him to ask how he knew. Therefore Naruto had thought that saying nothing would be better rather than just opening new problems. I'm not sure, young Uzumaki. My father told me to spread the knowledge of chakra. I followed my father's footsteps, sure that was the way towards peace. The conflicts between each other started soon after the birth of my third child. My children took responsibility for my actions. People did not come together when the knowledge of chakra was spread. Wars didn't end. They stayed the same. Ashura said with a heavy heart. He could remember when he was first forced to execute a member of their group. He had been caught using chakra to people for fun. He had been caught red-handed in his basement, body parts everywhere hanging around the wall. In his personal room, he had found him there smiling eagerly. Jars filled with blood in the table behind him, bodies of men, women and children hanging around the walls like decorations, their guts hanging from their sliced open stomachs. A corpse hanging behind him had 4 arms attached around his back. Psycho Jaime had started laughing in front of him, saying that he would find every little secret that chakra was hiding from him. The experiments were needed to find just how strong can a person get. Ashura hated him on the spot. The bodies were buried, but the body of Psycho was thrown into the wilderness and let him rot, without a place where people could remember him. The second time had been after many years in Jui town. His children had discovered people forcing the town to give them money, in return for healing them, but the worst part was they were the ones causing the sickness. I don't have any easy answers, young Senju. Even my father didn't know how to bring peace. My grandmother tried to enslave the whole world, and my father believed spreading the chakra would bring people together. My advice to you, young Senju, is to unite the people of this world, under one symbol, under one village. Like how Hashirama and Madara created the Hidden Leaf Village, I believe you can create a new one that belongs to everyone, Ashura advised. Naruto said nothing as the figure of Ashura started disappearing until it was gone. The young blonde found himself in the apartment again, his hands rubbing his back. Naruto understood what he meant, at least he hoped he did. His thoughts were on his Uchiha family. Would it be safer for them? What would they think? Naruto looked down at his palms, at the moon and sun symbol. Why did he have so much responsibility? It wasn't enough that he was an orphan, but the people of his home hated his guts. Kurama, what do you think is the difference between right and wrong? Is there any difference, or is the line between right and wrong just as an illusion we create for ourselves? Naruto asked quietly, as his eyes kept looking at his palms. Kurama stayed quiet for some time. He wasn't sure of the answer. I'm not sure, Naruto. In my life, those people that tried to capture me and use my chakra for their own gain were wrong. But what if those people were desperate people that needed to protect their loved ones? At that point in life, the line between right and wrong slowly gets thinner when it comes to helping the ones we love, because without them, we are nothing, Kurama said. Naruto listened to his words and his mind went back to his Nisan. His mind remembered Shisui, Makoto-chan, and Kurama. His best friend. Naruto said nothing as his body lied on the floor, his hands together in front of his face, his head feeling the carpet below his head, a red carpet. What is the cost of peace? After 1 week, the following week, Naruto kept practicing. His clones had him surrendered. They had formed a circle around him. Itachi and Shisui were looking closely at Naruto since he told them he wanted to show something to them. Each clone grabbed a kunai from their pouches, and immediately threw them at Naruto. The blonde activated his Sharingan and saw the kunai moving slower. He grabbed a single kunai and threw at one closest to him, causing it to change the direction that hit another kunai and another one. Itachi and Shisui gasped that every single kunai had fallen in the ground and hadn't reached Naruto. A proud smile erupted on both of their faces, seeing him, but next thing surprised them and put them on guard immediately. Each clone suddenly showed right in front of Naruto. Each one had Sharingans on their eyes. Shisui was about to intervene when Naruto threw himself up in the air doing hand signs. Fire style. Dragon form jutsu. A Hug's dragon came out of his mouth and obliterated every clone in the ground. Itachi and Shisui jumped away from the unbearable heat coming from the red flames that burned down the whole grass in the entire training field. Itachi noticed that leaves around the trees had turned dark from the heat. He hadn't known about the existence of red fire. He had known of Amaterasu, the dark flames that never extinguished. The Uchiha duo moved over to Naruto, who was lying in the middle of the field breathing heavily. The whole field had turned dark and smoke around the ground, his chest rising up and down like that would be his last breath, and he was trying to breathe as much as possible. That was awesome, Naruto. You sure have many secrets, Shisui stated, helping him up and slapping his back. That was indeed incredible, Naruto-kun. Didn't know there was red fire, Itachi commented, as his eyes noticed that the moon symbol on Naruto's palm looked slightly darker, or maybe that was just him. I didn't know about crimson red flames myself, though indeed does look awesome, and they are way stronger than normal flames, Naruto replied. Itachi had already figured out the last part and wondered that if he should teach him his explosive clone jutsu, and fire style, star fire. Itachi decided to teach him that as a birthday gift for his 7th birthday. It had been a week since Hinata Hyuga had been saved from Naruto. The word had spread like wildfire. The clans were happy to hear that Naruto had saved Hyuga's heiress, but the civil part was more skeptical. Some stayed neutral while some would say that the demon was getting strong or some dumb shit like that. Itachi had invited Naruto to his house 6 days ago to eat dinner with them, but Naruto had respectfully declined his offer. Itachi of course knew about how his last visit ended. He still remembered his little brother calling Naruto parentless. The Uchiha prodigy hasn't told anyone, but he was half convinced to tell his Ka-chan. She would know what to say to Sasuke. Hello, Itachi, you there? Itachi escaped his thoughts when he saw Shisui knocking on his forehead almost like he was knocking on a door and waiting to open it. What? Itachi asked, not knowing what the problem was. Raikage will come today. Hokage told me 2 days ago to be prepared if my help is needed. Only now has Itachi noticed that Naruto wasn't here anymore. His eyes roamed around the field but couldn't see him anywhere. Naruto went to his house. He said he wanted to deal with something. Shisui informed him and they soon both left towards the Uchiha compound. Apartment. Naruto was sitting in a cross position, a blank letter in front of him lying on a table, a brush and black paint. The clones had started reading Fuinjutsu, but Naruto soon realized that reading Fuinjutsu would almost be pointless without practicing it. Therefore Naruto took it upon himself to train his Fuinjutsu. If a seal could hold the likes of Kurama inside his tummy, his mind wondered what could he do by advancing it even more. As he was writing a level 1 seal, his senses detected a huge chakra level suddenly showing up in the village. Hiashi Hyuga. Oh. He heard his daughter squeak when he entered the room. Hinata. Hiashi smiled. Though it was technically not proper behavior, he could understand the child's tears. She did go through quite an ordeal. Are you all right, Hinata? The girl nodded and quickly tried to wipe away her tears, knowing her father disapproved of such lack of composure. Not that she had much success, as new tears appeared just as fast. Naruto-kun saved us. But, Naruto-kun is fine, a female voice spoke from behind Hiashi. Not that he was very surprised, as his wife at times seemed to be aware of everything. Hiashi knew very well that if he was to be regarded as the best Jukin practitioner of the clan, Hyuga Hitomi would be the one with the best eyesight. Hitomi. Hiashi. The woman smiled. Hinata is uninjured, despite the kidnapper's crude methods. Okay, can I? Hinata looked up to her mother. Can I see him? Where is he? He is in his home, she said gently. Hinata's face turned down, her disappointment obvious to her parents. But the clan owes Naruto-kun if he had not stopped the kidnapper, Hitomi added. Can we help him? Hinata begged. Hiyashi looked at his wife, who was busy correcting a deviant strand of her daughter's dark blue hair. His wife took a strange pride in that their eldest daughter had the same color of hair as she had. We will. And should, Hitomi assured her daughter, looking up at her husband's frown. If it wasn't for Naruto, we wouldn't have our daughter here, as only appropriate we reward him, perhaps giving him shelter. Naruto can stay with us, Hinata said hopefully. Hiyashi nodded. That would be proper. For now, I will ask Hokage-sama for formal approval. He emphasized on the last word, making clear to his wife that the case of Uzumaki Naruto was a special one. Not that he needed to tell her. Hitomi often paid more attention to affairs outside of the clan than he did. She knew very well who and what Uzumaki Naruto was. Hokage Tower. Hokage-sama. Hiyashi, the Hokage answered with a tired voice. Meeting the elders of the council had been a very bothersome half-hour. Any developments regarding the kidnapper? Did Kumogakure respond? The Hokage sighed. We can't tell, but Shukaku suspects he was sent here with a mission to kidnap a suitable female Hyuga so that Kumo could gain access to the Byakugan. Hiruzen saw Hiyashi's eyes narrow, as he considered the implication of what was said. No father would like to hear his daughter was targeted for the children she could bear. It wasn't like Hiruzen wasn't angered by this, but he lived too long to know that he couldn't make decisions based on emotions. But he was not in control of the Hyuga clan. And if the Hyuga would demand retribution, with the substantial influence they had within the village, this demand could lead to war. It all boils down to what Hiyashi decided. Fortunately, things did not turn out that way, Hiruzen added with his weary voice. Now that the peace treaty is formalized, and we have quickly spread that piece of news across the borders, Kumo knows that their position is unfavorable. They cannot make any demands without revealing that they breached the treaty themselves first. Kumo will not be able to try something like this again, not without damaging the diplomatic position it has with other nations as well. If this got out, no one would trust them again. I believe Kumogakure would choose an uneasy peace over an international scandal which could potentially lead to a war between them and a coalition of hidden villages. Hiyashi nodded. Through alliances and treaties were not respected as much as many would like, there was a consensus between the nations that those who broke a treaty within the same year should be considered honorless and could therefore be attacked by any nation without consequences to international relations. Even though the military prowess of Kumogakure was great, perhaps even being the strongest nation in the world, it would not withstand a combined attack from the other nations. Hokage-sama, the Hyuga will not officially blame Kumo, neither for the attempt to kidnap my daughter, nor the damage they have caused at our estate. We were fortunate that there were no grave injuries, and that Hinata is safe. Hiyashi took a short breath before he made his request, knowing the sensitivity of the subject for Sarutobi Hiruzen, who was rumored to have an attachment to the boy. And even beyond that attachment, the village's Jinchuriki was deemed to be a creature outside of the control of a single clan. Else, the Sarutobi would have adopted him the day he was orphaned. But the potential power which a Jinchuriki represented was a thing that every clan coveted. And as such, would not allow another clan to have. But if the voices of the most powerful clan, the Hyuga, and the most powerful person, the Hokage, aligned, even if it was done to repay a debt, Hiyashi was shrewd enough to ensure that his clan would benefit. Hokage Dono, though I will not blame anyone, I would like to acknowledge the debt our clan owes. Your debt? Sarutobi answered wonderingly. Without Uzumaki Naruto, my daughter and heir would be on her way to Kumo. I would like to repay him, at least by sheltering him for a while. Hiruzen's eyes went wide with surprise at the request and dropped back into his chair. For a few moments, he stayed silent, considering the possibilities. Hiyashi, you know very well that this child cannot be attached to any clan. Hiyashi was about to speak again when Hiruzen raised his hand. I have already received multiple requests from Shukaku, Makoto Uchiha, Fugaku Uchiha, Inoichi Yamanaka, Inazuka clan. I would like to adopt Naruto, but can't. I'm afraid if you like to do something for him, you can perhaps help him in other ways, Hiruzen stated with a painful heart. Hiyashi said nothing. His facial expression didn't change, not even in the slightest, but inside he couldn't help but feel that his daughter would be disappointed. Hiruzen. He stood close to his desk smoking his pipe, his mind on what Hiyashi offered. Did I do something wrong? What about the other clans? Hiruzen asked himself, feeling a headache coming. He hoped Jiraiya this time would decide to come and stop wasting time. Just as he finished that thought, the window opened immediately. He didn't bother to check who it was. Door just was never an option, Hiruzen said as he heard his student laugh. Doors are just a waste of time, nothing else, Jiraiya stated before his face turned serious and the temperature around the room decreased by a few degrees. What has Kumo done? Jiraiya asked, wanting more details about what has happened. Kakashi had sent him a brief recap, but he needed more information. Hiruzen sighed and told him everything, even Naruto's involvement in all of this. When Jiraiya heard the part that Naruto defeated a Jonin, he froze as he thought one single thing. He's just like you, Minato, Jiraiya thought with sadness, his student. Jiraiya, Raikage will arrive today, I need you to be prepared for everything, and if possible summon Chief Toad here, Hiruzen suggested, knowing they needed to show strength. Jiraiya had been deep in thought that he heard barely anything his sensei told him. Jiraiya. Sanin escaped his thoughts when he heard his sensei shout his name. What? Hiruzen said nothing but just sighed before turning his head towards the open window. Naruto is in apartment 7 near Nara compound if you want to visit him, Hiruzen suggested with a smile. Jiraiya remembered the blonde baby crying, his blue eyes, with a sigh he nodded his head and jumped outside the window. Jiraiya. Jiraiya stood at the top of a building, using a camouflage jutsu, looking through Naruto's window. The blonde was drawing something in a paper, Jiraiya suspected must be something about Fuinjutsu. His back was turned at Jiraiya, the Sanin felt his heart almost stop at his blonde hair, he felt trapped, the vision of Minato was right in front of him. He felt shivers around his whole body, the vision of Minato still fresh in his mind. At that moment Naruto turned his head to look at the window, Jiraiya stiffened, almost thinking that Naruto had detected him, but saw his eyes weren't focused on him, instead of to a bluebird drinking water from a fountain. Jiraiya saw Minato all over again, his son was a mini version of him, almost uncanny. Jiraiya bit his lower lip tightly to move his body again, he didn't know why he felt he couldn't move. His eyes went to the window again and saw Naruto had returned to drawing in the scroll. Jiraiya felt hot tears in his eyes, a tear slowly rolled down his cheek. With that, he disappeared from the view. Naruto. He felt Jiraiya had left, he closed his eyes tightly, so tightly that it was hurting, his eyes started burning like fire. His chest tightened, he tried to fill his lungs with air but he couldn't, his chest kept tightening like a trap, his heartbeat slowly getting slower, his hand holding his chest, as he felt everything getting covered in darkness and despair. Naruto heard Kurama calling to him, his head hit the floor, his whole body lying on the floor as hot tears were streaming down his cheek. Naruto had only one thought on his head as darkness greeted him like an old friend. If love is just a word, then why does it hurt so much when you understand that it isn't there? Killer Bee. He. His brother and Darui reached the Hidden Leaf Village. Beside them stood 25 members of the Lightning Team of Kumo. The team members were high Jonin level up to low S rank level. They had just reached the gate and from there B saw the giant toad that was standing right beside Hokage Tower. B knew what that meant. Jiraiya of the Sannin was here and he had summoned his toad, a clear indication of power. B couldn't help but wonder if Tsunade Senju was in the village as well. His brother's eye narrowed at the sight of the giant toad. Jiraiya wasn't a Sannin for nothing. Not mentioning he knew how to use Sage Chakra, something only he is known to be able to use. The last person who used Sage Chakra was Hashirama Senju himself. Soon they reached the Hokage Tower. The big toad was smoking from his pipe, but at the sight of them, his hand went to the handle of his sword. Walking inside the Hokage office, B had to give credit for their artwork, it looked beautiful. Inside the room stood the Hokage, beside him was a man glaring at them with white eyes. A Hyuga, B thought. His eyes found Jiraiya of the Sannin standing near a window, his body leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. At the left side of the Hokage stood who could only be Kakashi Hatake. His Sharingan was covered, and close to Hokage was seated a man with a scar and pineapple hair. Raikage-sama, I hope your journey was good, the Hokage said respectfully, much to B's surprise. It was good. Now let's not waste time with this. I want to know why my shinobi was without any provocation, I spat angrily. The Hyuga narrowed his eyes and B was sure he would attack. The old cage didn't say anything or react to the accusations. Your shinobi sneak inside Hyuga compound during the night and tried to kidnap Hinata Hyuga, the old cage retorted still with a calm tone. Where's your proof? All I see here is accusations. UED my shinobi and I want whoever did this in front of me, or the only answer is war, I shouted, raising on his feet looking down at the old cage. The Hyuga tried to stand up but the cage raised his hand. B only now noticed that the Sannin was standing behind them. When did he move? B asked himself as sweat rolled down his face. I have unmistakable proof in the 1WHOED your shinobi is only a child, the Hokage stated, causing the Kumo team to freeze. While B was thinking, the children here are already strong enough to beat our Jonins and my brother wants to fight against grown-ass man, good idea brother. Impossible, who did then? I screamed looking at the Hokage. He stood in the Hokage office, and his eyes were on the Raikage in his group. His eyes saw the large man looking at him with a stunned expression, almost as if he had seen him before. Naruto figured that must have been his father. His resemblances were there, even a blind man could see who his father was. But then his eyes saw the guy wearing weird dark glasses. Naruto, be careful, the one with multiple red swords tightened behind his back has Gyuki, the eight-tails octopus, Kurama warned him. Naruto mentally nodded but said nothing. He wondered why the Hokage had allowed a Jinchuriki of another country to walk inside the village. Still, knowing the Sannin standing behind them was a Fuinjutsu master, he knew the Sannin might be able to keep him in check if he tried to use Hachibi. Naruto could feel the sadness coming from the Sannin, same from a hidden Anbu to his right, and he figured he must be the dog Anbu. Still, his senses detected that Itachi and Shisui were inside the room as well, and both of them had activated their Sharingans. Naruto hoped this wouldn't turn into an all-out war, but he would need to reveal his Sharingan if it did. Raikage regained his composure. He didn't need to ask who the father was, but despite seeing his hair color and blue eyes, I could see the Red Death glaring at him. His face belonged to Kushina, there was no doubt whatsoever. Damn me and my stupid head, Raikage murmured under his breath and remembered the debt he had with both Minato and Kushina. Why didn't you finish me? You beat my speed. So why? I screamed at the yellow flash, his body barely standing. His sleeve was cut in several places, a deep cut across his shoulder but wasn't a lethal one. I hated this feeling. He hated to be seen as weak. If he died here, at least he would die against a worthy opponent. I'm not sure why, but even if your brother will never stop, that will only fuel him. I stood quiet and let the words roam around his head. When he had told B about it, he first got a good punch in the face for worrying him and a second punch for telling the yellow flash to take his life. I knew B was probably thinking the same thing. B was about to greet the little Minato when B, the kid, he is the one, he's Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, his friend suddenly said. B noticed a sudden stop and wondered if Gyuki wanted to say something else but didn't ask. For real. Damn, I never saw Minato sealing Kyuubi inside his own son, but that's still too much like him, B replied, mentally smiling, remembering the yellow flash. Who's the little fella? B asked, smiling, taking a step closer and pulling out his hand for Naruto to shake. This caused every Konoha shinobi in the room to tense, but Naruto could feel no malice or negative emotions whatsoever. On the contrary, he looked and felt happy to see him, which confused Naruto. My name is Naruto, Mr. 8, Naruto whispered the last part only for B to hear, who laughed loudly. I'll lick you, kid. B started rapping, bringing his fist towards Naruto, who bumped his fist in return. Suddenly they were both in a much different place, and Naruto saw himself standing at the top of Kurama. Naruto screamed, seeing Kurama. He was about to ask what was happening when an octopus with 8 tails and horns at the side of his head, almost like a bull, suddenly came out of a shadow. Naruto noticed there were 7 other places, but they were covered in shadows, but he noticed each place had a number in the floor. From 1 to 9, he was in front of number 9, and the center of the room was a symbol he had never seen before, yet he felt like he had seen it before. Naruto scratched his head, but no idea was showing up in his head. Ignoring his gut feeling, he turned to look at Gyuki. You must be Gyuki, Naruto exclaimed, not believing that he was seeing another Biju. He knew there were 8 others, but still seeing one was pretty astonishing. The guy with weird black glasses was standing on top of him. Indeed, I am young kid, Gyuki replied kindly, much to his surprise, but Naruto wondered why he stopped mid-sentence. You're standing at the top of Kurama. That means you go well with each other, Gyuki continued, earning a huff from the demon fox. My name iser B, me and Hachibi. Stop it, B, nobody cares, Gyuki immediately interjected. Naruto chuckled at their interaction. He had thought that Biju were supposed to be big and scary, but so far, this one was kind. As good to meet you, Gyuki, and you, B was it? Naruto questions, not understanding what the guy was saying. B was about to speak again when Gyuki said, his name Iser B, and don't listen to him, he's still a child and hasn't learned how to talk yet, Gyuki said, earning a hey from B, who was insulted that his friend wasn't backing up his fantastic singing voice. Naruto laughed. Now, not that I don't enjoy having a conversation with you two, but weren't we talking about whenever or not we will start a war? Naruto said, looking at them curiously. You don't need to worry, Mr. 9. I will talk with my brother. He won't dare to start any war, B claimed, and didn't try rapping like usual, something that Gyuki found surprising. Naruto raised his eyebrows in confusion, while he was happy to hear that his Uchiha family wouldn't have to go to war and risk their lives, which brought a question to his mind. Why? B grinned and crossed his legs. Let's just say it is a debt my brother and I have to the Yellow Flash and the Red Death. Naruto understood that he meant his father and mother, but didn't say aloud. Despite promising not to start a war, he still didn't exactly know or be. Therefore he just nodded his head in appreciation. I appreciate it, Naruto said, While this was happening, both Gyuki and Kurama were having a conversation that neither Naruto nor Bee heard. The kid, I saw his palms. He's the one? Gyuki asked, still wanting to be 100% sure that he wasn't dreaming. Indeed he is. I have seen him being able to talk with Ashura and Indra. He has already awakened the Rinnegan, but he's not strong enough to hold it for long. I'm sure he will be able to use Rinnegan the moment he awakens his Mangekyo Sharingan, Kurama replied with a hint of pride in his voice. Gyuki frowned. While he hadn't spent time with the Uchiha clan, even he knew what needed to happen for Naruto to awaken it. Kurama knew it as well, but with what Itachi said when Naruto was sleeping and not mentioning subtle hints here and there, the Uchiha clan's situation was not going well. But he wasn't sure what to do. He could tell Naruto, but that wouldn't help much. Naruto wasn't strong enough yet to do anything, and even if Naruto tried to use his power, that only would cause more chaos. Kurama wasn't sure what the future held, but he hoped for the best. You know how strong he can get? Gyuki asked. I know Gyuki, and Naruto has my full support. He needs my help, Kurama stated. Naruto suddenly returned to the Hokage tower and saw many were looking at them strangely. Their fists were still connected, moving his hand away. The Raikage looked at his brother with a knowing look. He had seen him do the same with Yugito, and Konoha had only one Biju. You're the one Whoed my shinobi? Raikage asked, but more like a statement. Naruto turned to look at the Raikage, and to his surprise, the Raikage held no malice. He wondered what was up with people of a foreign village being more friendly towards him than most people of his village. Naruto just nodded his head, and Raikage left out a huge breath. Inoichi Yamanaka had scanned Naruto. Your shinobi was found holding Hinata Hyuga in a bag over his shoulder, the third stated with a much more dangerous tone, his tone slightly higher, his pipe no longer on his mouth. While Inoichi didn't actually scan Naruto, the Raikage didn't need to know that part. The third wanted to show Naruto that he trusted his words, and forcing him to have his brain checked by Inoichi wouldn't help with that. Raikage said nothing but turned at the Hokage, and he took his seat. The Hokage gestures for Naruto to leave. The blonde left much to the disappointment of B. Training yard. After leaving the Hokage tower, he reached the training yard, and Naruto created 1,000 clones all around him. Now, all of you will beat me up until I can't move, Naruto shouted with a fist up in the air. Yes, sir, the clones shouted back with fists in the air. Several clones rushed at him. Naruto activated his Sharingan and jumped away. His moon started shining in dark color. Immediately he did several hand seals that were nearly impossible to trace, and he intertwined his fingers as he took a deep breath, drawing upon the chakra within his chest. Fire style. Great fire annihilation. He called out as he then unleashed a torrent of flame from his mouth. The blast of flame, so hot it was red in color, had a massive range and covered the entire training yard. The sea of flame towered everything. The very heat turned the ground into hot melted rock. The same air sizzled from the heat as the clones began a counterattack. Several clones jumped forward and synchronized their chakra. Sweden. Sujinheki, water release. Water wall. In response to Naruto's sea of flame, a massive amount of water was expelled from the clones to meet his attack. Superheated flames met cold water, and the effect was explosive. The temperature change caused the air to suddenly expand and contract and unleash a shock wave that threw the nearby clones off their feet before a massive screen of steam obscured their view. Then Naruto himself rushed through the mist and was completely unaffected by the sheer heat, and he got right into the sea of clones. Startled, many of the clones rushed to attack him from all sides. His Sharingan seemed to glow as his eyes darted back and forth and read their movements. Predicting their entire method of attack, He sidestepped the slash from a clone with ease, grasped his wrist and kicked upward to break his elbow and force him to drop the sword he was carrying. He grabbed the sword before it hit the ground and spun and slashed the blade into the shoulder of another clone that tried to stab him from behind with a kunai, and then Naruto kicked him away. Who wants to dance? Several clones rushed forward and tossed several shurikens at the Uchiha, who effortlessly blocked with his stolen sword and ran at them before they could counterattack and beheaded them with a single slash of his stolen blade. Their bodies puffed immediately. Like a demented dance, Naruto cut a swath of death and destruction through the clone army without even taking a single scratch. Like a twisted dance, the Uchiha spun, dodged and sidestepped attacks while deftly landing devastating blows. Another clone, in desperation, then tossed a kunai with an explosive tag in it, and Naruto then caught the kunai in midair with a finger and slapped the paper bomb onto an unfortunate clone and kicked him into the crowd. He desperately tried to take it off, but the bomb exploded, destroying several clones while he jumped into the smoke and destroyed several others. Another clone jumped at him when Naruto jumped high in the air, his hand signs, his Sharingan shining. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. A massive ball of fire collided with the ground, causing a huge explosion that threw the clones everywhere. The shockwave ripped apart trees. Naruto calculated that less than half were left. He landed on the ground and waited as the clones rushed towards him. Later, the training ground was desolated to wasteland, smoke coming out of several places around the battlefield, rocks and earth itself was red and glowing in several areas. Naruto was lying on the ground, his limbs spread, his chest rising up and down. After defeating his clones, he created 1,000 more clones and used only cold weapons, no jutsu and no Sharingan. Kurama was refueling him with chakra since Naruto had decided to train harsher than ever before. Kurama, that guy B, he can use Hachibi's chakra to the fullest, right? Naruto asked thoughtfully, and he noticed the chakra of B. Despite being a friend with Kurama from the very beginning, Yuki's whole chakra was freely moving around B's chakra network. Indeed he can. I haven't seen him, but if I had to guess, he might be able to control all tails worth of chakra and even transform into Yuki, Kurama replied, thinking that it might be about time to start training Naruto in how to use his chakra. Naruto figured that he might need to use Kurama's chakra, of course only with his permission. Kurama, would you allow me to train in controlling your chakra? Naruto requested. You can, brat, but we will start with only one tail. Having too many tails immediately might be an overdrive even for the likes of you, Kurama responded, not mentioning that Naruto needed to get rid of his dark side to fully be able to use his chakra and get access to KCM, Kurama chakra mode. Naruto mentally thanked his furball friend for allowing him. I can still hear your thoughts, brat. Who are you calling a furball? After 1 month, Naruto was looking outside the window. It had been 3 weeks since the Kumo team had left. Itachi told him that Raikage admitted the order and took full responsibility for it. In return, Hokage wouldn't spread the word, and Kumo wouldn't be shamed in the process. Raikage signed an agreement to be in neutral friendship, and it meant they weren't enemies but neither allies. Much to his surprise, Raikage had asked about Naruto and if it would be alright to develop their friendship in the near future. Sadly, in that part, Hiruzen had ordered all his Anbu except Shikaku to leave. Whatever offer Raikage suggested, no one knew. Naruto didn't ask them. While he stayed in the village, B would spend every day with the little blonde, much to his happiness. I have another friend, Naruto thought, happy. Much to young Uzumaki's surprise, B told him about a girl named Yugito. Apparently, she was the Jinchuriki of Two Tails Cat. When B mentioned her, Kurama had started grumbling. Naruto was walking around the Konoha streets with B, the blonde, of course, could feel at least 7 Anbu following them from the shadows, and he could tell one of them was Shisui, who was staying in guard all the time, especially when B sometimes would slap his back in a friendly manner. So, Naruto, do you know any place worth visiting? B asked with a carefree tone. Usually, he would try rapping, but Naruto was only a kid and probably wouldn't understand half of his words. B couldn't help but notice the glares coming from the civilians. Some were glaring at him. Most probably they had heard about what Kumo tried to do to the Hyuga heiress, but much to his surprise, almost everyone was glaring at the little ball of sunshine walking beside him. B felt terrible for him. It didn't take long to realize that Naruto wasn't living with anyone. And if people glared at him every single day like this, he wondered how this would affect him, or maybe it has already affected him. Ichiraku Ramen is a good restaurant. They make the best ramen in the world, Naruto stated. Then let's go. Little blonde, lead the way, B shouted with his fist up in the air. After eating, Naruto figured B might like the shops around the village, perhaps buy a souvenir or something, or purchase extra weird glasses. Both Naruto and B spent the entire day together. Naruto was busy telling him about his life. By half of the day, B started teaching him the art of rapping. At first, Naruto was skeptical but decided to listen to him. At the end of the day, Naruto could sing something. B called it progress and promised to teach more in the future. Tell me, young sunshine, have you thought to start training in controlling Kyuubi's chakra? B asked with a low tone. Not yet. Kurama says I will start once I'm ready, according to him, Naruto replied. In that case, let me give you a few tips. First, the hardest tail to control will always be the first, in your case, the fourth and the ninth tail. Once you control the first tail, you can easily go up to 3 tails, but 4 tails are where it gets tricky. Going from 3 to 4 tails is much harder than going from 0 to 3. Second advice, since Kurama is your friend, we'll make it a bit easier not to go berserk, but don't think that won't happen, so don't go overboard. Third, only try in a secured environment. Fourth, think of good memories whenever you try to use an extra tail. B finished, and they bumped their fists. Thank you, B-sensei, Naruto said smiling. Naruto remembered the day with a smile, and B promised to meet again as soon as possible. Raikage had taken a week to make a deal with the Hokage, whatever that meant. The blonde just hoped that the Hokage wouldn't force him into anything. Now soon, the academy would start. Naruto wasn't that much looking forward to it, but he figured he could make new friends. To save Hinata Hyuga, her mother and father visited his home one day. They were both surprised to see an actual clear home with nothing on the carpet or just in a mess. Both had personally thanked him and told him that Hyuga clan would always be there for him if he ever needed anything. Naruto said that it had been nothing and he just protected someone when they needed help. Hiyashi also told him that Hinata would be in the same year as him in the academy. Naruto just nodded his head at that, and they soon left home. Just like that, a year passed away. Naruto slowly reached 7 years old and 1 year spent in the academy. After 1 year he made his way towards the academy. He still remembered the first day. Thankfully Shikamaru and Choji were there. He thought back to the first day of the academy a year ago. Inside, Naruto found that he was the third person to arrive. Looking over towards the back, he saw a boy with an oversized green jacket and sunglasses. He must be shy or something to hide in a jacket like that, Naruto thought. By the window, he looked over the other occupant, a raven-haired boy in a navy blue shirt and tan shorts with a fan symbol on his back, so the emo had decided to grace us with his presence. Taking a seat in the middle of the classroom, he waited for everyone else to arrive. Meanwhile, he went through his backpack to make sure he had all of his books and utensils. Kids started to rush in, not wanting to be late for the first day. Sitting in the same booth as him to his right was a dark-haired boy with a ponytail that oddly resembled a pineapple, looking like he just woke up for the first time in his life. Next to him and further down in the rightmost spot was a chubby kid with swirls on his cheeks happily munching on what he guessed was barbecue chips if the smell was anything to go by. Looking up from his row mates, he saw a man in standard Chunin clothing with a horizontal scar along his nose. Iruka cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. "Welcome to your first day at the academy. My name is Iruka Yumino, and I will be your sensei until you graduate. Congratulations on passing the entrance exam and taking the first steps in becoming a leaf shinobi. Note, however, that it only gets harder from here. Today will be an introduction day with several tests." Some of the students started to groan. Iruka shot them all a glare. "As I was saying, several tests to see where everyone's at." After explaining the daily schedule for normal academy days and the tests they will be doing today, Iruka starts passing around the written tests to everyone. Iruka looks to see if everyone has a test and nods to himself. "Okay. You will have 1 hour to complete this to the best of your knowledge. The test goes over information that was in the textbook you were given 2 weeks ago after the entrance exam. Begin." Naruto picked up his pencil and started on his test. After looking over the questions, he smiled to himself. It seemed as though all that reading paid off. After Iruka called for everyone to hand in their test, Naruto nodded, happy with his answers. Iruka organized the stack of papers before he noticed that it was time for lunch. "Now you all are dismissed for lunch, and you have 1 hour to be back here. Don't be late." Naruto followed the other students outside to the lunch area. Looking around for a spot to eat, he decided to sit under a tree that didn't have anyone nearby. He opened his bag that had his lunch inside, and he had prepared a homemade sandwich with steak, followed by tomatoes that he didn't like much, but Makoto-chan told him many times that he needed to eat all kinds of vegetables and fruits. The 2 people Naruto sat next to in the classroom walked up to him as he opened his bag. "Hi, my name is Choji, this is Shikamaru. Can we sit with you?" A smiling Choji asks while gesturing to the bored-looking Shikamaru next to him. "Hello, I'm Naruto, you can sit if you want," Naruto said while internally happy that they wanted to eat with him. "So, what did you 2 think about the test?" asked Naruto. He was curious if he was the only one to read over the textbook before class. "I thought it was too troublesome, so I just finished as fast as I could and took a nap," Shikamaru said lazily. This caused Naruto to raise an eyebrow. "I have seen old people with more pep in them than this guy." Naruto looks over to a chuckling Choji expectantly. "Well, it was okay. I don't think I failed," Choji said shyly. Lunch turned into a comfortable silence as the 3 boys ate. "Okay, everyone, lunch is over." The shout came from Iruka. Going back to his seat, he looks at his sensei expectantly for whatever is next. "Now, we will spend the rest of the day in the training ground to finish the rest of the tests," Iruka said before leading the students to the academy training ground. The academy training ground wasn't anything special, and it had a variety of targets, a running track and an obstacle course for the older students to do. "Okay, everyone, we will start with shuriken and kunai throwing. You will be graded and ranked, so take this seriously," instructed Iruka, eyeing some of the students that didn't look all that interested. Naruto watched everyone go up and take their test. Naruto noticed that nobody got higher than 1 or 2 hits so far, and those were the clan children. "Uchiha Sasuke," called Iruka. Sasuke walked up and took his stance before he started throwing his shuriken. He surprised everyone by getting 4/10 on shuriken and kunai, causing some of the girls to blush at his coolness when he just turned around and walked off without saying a word. Uzumaki Naruto, called Iruka, startling him out of his thoughts. He walks up to the post and picks up some shuriken, taking a breath and letting them fly like he has been practicing. Throwing the shuriken like he's been practicing, Naruto had a huge grin, having hit 10 out of 10 shuriken. Looking over at Iruka-sensei, he sees a surprising look as Iruka wrote on his clipboard. Naruto grabs the kunai and hits 10 out of 10 again. Happy at having the best score, he turned to look at the rest of the class. The guys were kind of put off at a kid being so much better than them, and the girls were all looking at him with awe. Beating Sasuke, who is an Uchiha, it was just unbelievable. He must be a prodigy. I know beating an Uchiha on the first day. Plus, he is kinda cute with the whiskers. Naruto blushed at the last one. He walked over to Shikamaru, who was eyeing him differently than before, and a frowning Sasuke who looked like someone just stole his candy. What did you think of that, Shikamaru? Not too bad, huh? Shikamaru just looked at him for another second before turning away, deeming the situation troublesome. Sasuke steps forward not to be shown up by some nobody. Don't get used to it. I will beat you in taijutsu for sure. Challenged Sasuke. He's going to be number one like his older brother before him. Naruto, grinning is crazy, looked at Sasuke. I don't think so. I have been training since I was a kid, and I'm gonna be the best, said Naruto confidently. Sasuke just brushed it off and waited for the taijutsu spars to start, knowing the last names they would be paired with. He would show the nobody then. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow at Naruto's words. They were only 6 years old, and he talked as if he was at least 10 years old. After what Iruka thought was above average accuracy results for first day students, he flipped the page on his clipboard. Now we will start on the paired sparring. When I call your names to come up and get into your stance, all styles are permitted, family or otherwise. Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto, you two are up. Iruka called out, and he would never admit to favoring any student over another. But he was excited to see this match. Walking up to the ring, Naruto got into the loose stance for the style he's been practicing. Sasuke got into his stance, which Naruto noticed was like Itachi's style. After hearing Iruka shout, "Begin!" Naruto rushes in at Sasuke. Sasuke was taken off guard at how fast the blonde was. He barely avoided the punch to his face and went for a leg sweep. Naruto vaulted over Sasuke and kicked him in the back, making him stumble forward. Naruto uses the opportunity to rush Sasuke. Sasuke, who was regaining his balance from being kicked, rolled back to get to his feet and charged at Naruto. Both engaged in an impressive bout of taijutsu. Naruto saw an opening and sunk his fist into Sasuke's stomach, making him double over. Naruto follows up with a kick, knocking Sasuke back and onto his back, then rushes over and points a kunai in Sasuke's face. Enough. Winner Naruto, called out an impressed Iruka. Walking back over to the class and Iruka-sensei, Naruto notices the girls and the guys were surprised that someone could beat Sasuke. The Uchiha are usually the best in taijutsu, and Naruto took him down on the first day of class. Whispers were heard, man shurikenjutsu and now taijutsu, this kid has to be some kind of prodigy, no way he isn't. One civilian boy said to another, both nodding, wow, he beat Sasuke-kun so easily, what a handsome guy. A blonde-haired girl in purple said to a wide pink-haired girl who just shook her head repeatedly. Okay, everyone, that is all for today. You can head home. The test results will be given back tomorrow, said Iruka, looking at Naruto a little longer than the others. Hokage's office. Iruka stood in front of the third Hokage going through his report. To be expected from a class with most of the clan heirs, they did better than average. However, one Naruto Uzumaki stood out from the rest. He scored 10 out of 10 on both Shuriken and Kunai and beat Sasuke Uchiha in Taijutsu. Also, his test score on the written exam this morning was quite surprising in that he knew most of the material. The only person that came close was a civilian girl by the name of Sakura Haruno. He has the makings of a genius. We should keep an eye on him, possibly even putting him in a higher grade to give him more of a challenge, reported Iruka. The third nodded to himself. Where would you put his performance compared to the other years? The third was curious about the little blonde talent and whether or not he should be moved up yet. I would say years 2 or 3 possibilities, and we won't know for sure until we cover more material, answered Iruka. Hiruzen nodded. Okay, dismissed. With a quick, Hokage-sama. Iruka left, taking out his crystal ball and watching a certain blonde boy read a book while eating dinner, and sighed, if he continues like this, people will put 2 and 2 together. He is pretty much a clone of his father, and if word spreads of a spiky blonde-haired blue-eyed genius, people will find out who he is. Which is something that would be a big headache should that spread to some other countries like Iowa. I should classify his info and his parents' info on a much higher level to be safe, a good thing not too many people know anyway. The third took out his pipe and puffed on his glorious tobacco before getting back to work. Naruto went through hand seals. After ending in the snake seal, he called out, Earth release, Earth-style wall. A massive wall of solid earth shot up from the ground before him. Proud of his now 5th mastered jutsu, Naruto started reminiscing about his time in the academy so far. Naruto's shurikenjutsu has gotten to a level that stationary targets weren't even difficult anymore. He's starting to practice wire techniques, something that only the most skilled in shurikenjutsu learn. In taijutsu, Naruto hasn't learned any new styles. He still relies on the Uchiha style form and the unnamed style from the book he was given from Itachi. Naruto has made alterations to both styles to fit his small body, albeit average for his age. He changed the style to focus heavily on speed and counterattacks. Genjutsu Naruto can say he is at the top of his class, but he doesn't know anything other than the Sharingan Genjutsu. Naruto was disappointed to find that in the academy library, only Genjutsu theory was covered. He would have to wait until he was a genin to make any headway in the illusion department. In ninjutsu, Naruto's most pleased with his progress. After receiving the scroll of jutsu from Itachi, he added 5 new jutsu, which he had just mastered last one. The others include the water release, jet stream. This jutsu has many forms, a wide cone of water to a concentrated stream, the more chakra, the further the range. Fire release. Flame bullet. This was a smaller version of the Uchiha's famous fireball jutsu. Wind release. Wind bullets, another chakra-dependent jutsu in that the more chakra fed into the technique, the more bullets produced and the stronger they would be. Lastly is his favorite jutsu so far, lightning release. Lightning stream. The user would extend 2 fingers after condensing lightning chakra and release it all at once in a stream. It was mostly a stunning jutsu, but with enough chakra and control, it could pierce or even. Right now, Naruto put his hand on his pocket to see the kunai Shisui had gifted him for his birthday, and Makoto made the sweater he was wearing. Just the thought of the last winter put a smile on his face. Naruto knew this was how family felt like, and he would give it all to protect them. The snow had started for 5 weeks now. Naruto stood in his apartment. Thankfully the fire was ablaze in the fireplace, and it was warm despite the minus temperature outside. Naruto couldn't help but just look at the snow as it was falling. He didn't know why, but it was very relaxing. Naruto also knew the new year would be today. Therefore, a lot of celebrations will be around the hidden leaf. Thankfully the new year would distract the people, and Naruto found it this day as the only few days when he could go outside without anyone glaring at him. Naruto gently touched the new jacket he was wearing. Makoto-chan had bought it for him this birthday. Itachi had given him 2 fire jutsu scrolls. As he kept looking at the snow outside, he suddenly felt 2 chakras right outside his door. A huge smile erupted on his face like a volcano. Guess who it is? Shisui asked from behind the door. Itachi rolled his eyes and was about to knock when the door opened, and Naruto jumped at him like an arrow and hugged him. "Ni-san," he shouted in joy. Itachi smiled and gave Shisui a look. "I told you so," and the other Uchiha grunted. "So you love him more than me? You wound me, Naruto," Shisui said, whipping away an imaginary tear from his face and his right hand on his heart. Both Itachi and Naruto chuckled. The young blonde pulled away and turned to look at Shisui. "Well, Itachi is my Ni-san, and you're like an uncle," Naruto stated with a smirk on his face. This caused dark clouds to suddenly appear at the top of Shisui's head and started raining only at him despite the cold temperature. An uncle, Shisui repeated, hugging his legs with a low tone of despair. Both Itachi and Naruto sweat dropped at the behavior of the Uchiha prodigy. Naruto thought about where the clouds even came from and could have sworn that he heard a voice inside his head. Just like Hashirama, is he secretly a Senju? Naruto didn't know where the voice came from and decided to ignore it. "Just joking around, Shisui, of course, you're my big brother." This caused Shisui to suddenly stand up and put his hand around his neck and rub his spiky hair with his other hand. "You little brat," Shisui said jokingly, rubbing his hair much to the annoyance of Naruto, who was desperately trying to escape the grasp of Shisui. Itachi smiled and could see a slight smile on Naruto's face despite his mouth saying something else. "Now Naruto, today is a celebration. Mother wants you to celebrate with us," Itachi said, hoping the little blonde would accept despite his little brother having a tendency to talk shit to Naruto for whatever reason. Naruto thought to say no since he didn't want to cause any trouble, but he decided to spend this day with his 2 big brothers despite his better judgment. "Fine," he said before pointing an accusing finger at Shisui. "But if this one throws snowballs at me when I'm not looking, I will kick both of your butts until we reach the Uchiha compound," Naruto said with a half-joking tone. Shisui, when he heard his demand, hid a snowball behind his back and grinned innocently at Naruto. "Naruto, why would I ever do such a thing?" Shisui said, whipping away imaginary tears with his free hands. Before Naruto could respond, a snowball hit his blonde hair with Shisui grinning and immediately ran away. "Good luck Itachi," he said while running. Before the Uchiha prodigy could understand why Shisui said that, he saw Naruto making the biggest snowball. "Haha, bye," Itachi said, running with Naruto hot on his trail. "Come back here, both of you," Naruto demanded and started a chase of cat and mouse. Naruto found Shisui and hit him behind his back. This blonde ran away with Shisui chasing him holding 2 snowballs in his hand. "Come back here, sunshine, I just want to play," Shisui demanded playfully. Naruto grinned madly. With his sensor, he quickly found Itachi hiding at the top of a pole. Naruto dodged a snowball that hit Itachi in the face. Itachi glared at both of them before chasing them around like crazy. "Come back, both of you, right now," Itachi demanded as he threw snowballs at both of them. After 1 hour of chasing each other around the village, they stopped playing, with Naruto grinning and raising 9 fingers from his hands. "Only 9 times, you lose Shisui," he said, causing him to pout before he started rubbing his blonde hair. Naruto laughed and tried to move his hand away. Later, around 5 p.m., people had started hanging around the village, visiting restaurants and many different shops. Naruto reached the Uchiha compound, both his brothers standing at his side, but Naruto couldn't help but notice the small glares coming at him, but this time they were different. He had seen hateful eyes his whole life, but these eyes were different. Naruto just couldn't put it together why it felt different. The blonde decided to ignore them and was happy to know Shisui was spending the day with them. Since Shisui was an orphan, he had decided to spend the night with Itachi's family. P.S. Naruto, the blonde turned to his right to see Shisui gesturing for him to walk closer. Itachi ignored them. Hey Naruto, tonight, our Itachi is inviting a lady friend. You as a little brother should 100% try to support him to make a move. Naruto's eyes widened at his eyes, and he couldn't stop but look at Itachi in surprise. Her name is Izumi. When she arrives, make sure to tell her how much our innocent Itachi talks about her when she isn't around, Shisui whispered with his arm around the blonde's neck. Naruto had no idea that this Izumi even existed. He just nodded his head despite having no idea what actually to say to her. Shisui grinned and patted his back and started acting as if nothing was said, much to Itachi's annoyance who had a guess. Home. Ka-chan, I'm home, Itachi said, followed closely by Naruto. Shisui had left saying he needed to do something first. Itachi-kun, oh Naruto-kun, is good to have you here, Makoto said, smiling, walking towards them before Naruto could process it. Makoto hugged him tightly and kissed his cheek. It's good to have you here, Naruto-kun, she whispered and pulled away and walked back. Naruto smiled. Walking inside, he saw Sasuke was reading a scroll laid on the table in front of him. He turned and saw Itachi. Itachi, can you show me tomorrow how to do the flower fire jutsu? Sasuke asked. The smile on Itachi's face faded slightly. The older Uchiha told Sasuke to come with them to play snowballs, but Sasuke had refused, saying that he needed to get stronger to show how much stronger the Uchiha clan was. Maybe Sasuke, you should enjoy it today and play. You shouldn't see each day you live as a test. Sasuke pouted before his eyes hardened at noticing the blonde, who this time didn't bother with him but just went to the kitchen. After helping Makoto-chan with the biscuits and other desserts, Naruto was mixing something that he wasn't sure what. Thank you for helping Naruto-kun, you are really good at cooking, just like. She stopped mid-sentence, knowing what she almost had said. The cage had specifically told her and a few others that he would tell Naruto the truth when he thinks that he's ready. Naruto, of course, knew. Like who? Like your mother. Your face is just like hers but the hair and eyes of your father, Makoto said, feeling tears developing in her eyes. Thank you. No one tells me about them. I appreciate it, and I'm thankful for everything that you did for me, Naruto said, smiling. You can call me Ka-chan when we are alone, Naruto. I don't mind, Makoto said, rubbing his blonde hair. Naruto hides his face away from her and whips away the tears. Thank you for loving me, he mentally said. 9 p.m. Naruto was sitting on the couch chatting with Shisui about something. Fugaku had arrived early today and spoke something with Itachi and Sasuke when a knock was heard on the door. Come in, Fugaku said, but Itachi stood up immediately to open the door, but the door opened, revealing a girl around Itachi's age, long dark hair. Naruto had to admit that his brother had chosen quite a beautiful one. Izumi-chan, is good to have you here, Itachi said, smiling and blushing slightly, much to the amusement of both Naruto and Shisui, who were grinning like crazy. Oh, how are you doing, Izumi-chan, Makoto said, winking at Itachi's face, whose face turned red in embarrassment. Makoto welcomed Izumi inside and made sure that Itachi was sitting right beside her. Naruto, at this point, was barely holding his laughter. The big brother who he thought was invincible was completely defenseless. Even the stoic Sasuke looked amused by what was happening with his brother. Soon Fugaku brought a gift for Itachi and Sasuke. For Itachi, he gave him a scroll with A rank on the top, while for Sasuke, he gave him several kunai and shurikens that weren't real sharp but mostly for target practice. Naruto was happy when Makoto brought him a little box, much to his surprise. Open it. Naruto opened it to find a red scarf that was perfect for him. Do you like it? Thank you so much, Naruto said, smiling like never before. While this happened, Shisui looked at his little brother's happy face, and he remembered the most important thing in this world again. Almost 12 a.m. Naruto was outside, standing just looking at the sky, the snow falling on his face. He heard footsteps. He turned his head to see Shisui sitting close to him. Beautiful night. Indeed. I wish this moment would never end, Naruto said, melancholy. Shisui turned to him and put his hand on his shoulder. I know what you go through, Naruto. I lost my parent at a very young age. I don't even remember them anymore, but you have me, Naruto, and I will do anything to protect my little brother. Shisui gave him a side hug. At the other side of the house, Itachi stood with Izumi watching the snow falling.